On 5 News, the race to rescue thousands of holidaymakers. British tourists told to get out of the Gambia now because of fears of a civil war.
Staff have been fantastic here, keeping calm, but it's a front. You can see it in people's eyes. They're quite scared.
Now with everybody panicking, I'm beginning to panic myself.
Also tonight, celebrations as wheelchair users are told they do have priority over buggies on the bus. But disabled people still face daily battles just getting on public transport.
What's happened now and how it makes you feel?
Basically, I want to get on the bus. The driver said it's too big inside.
2 days to go before he becomes president, and Donald Trump is still hitting back at those who say he's unfit for office. And from the Far East to East London, the train bringing Chinese goods direct to your door. Hello and welcome to 5 News. I'm Sian Williams. Thousands of British tourists in the Gambia are being scrambled onto planes and heading home because of fears for their safety tonight. The West African country, which is hugely popular with winter sun seekers, is under threat of a civil war after a disputed election. Travellers have described panic and chaos as they were told to get out as quickly as possible. Peter Lane reports.
For British tourists in the Gambia, a blunt message from their holiday rep.
It's not a very good news. It's basically that we are going to evacuate everyone back home today.
With the threat of unrest and even civil war, it's time to get out.
I wasn't worried until now. I thought everything would go smoothly. But now with everybody panicking, I'm beginning to panic myself.
The atmosphere's been building. The staff have been fantastic here, keeping calm. But it's a front. You can see it in people's eyes. They're quite scared.
I think I'd rather be home than something terrible happen. By the sounds of it, better going today than tomorrow.
With fears that the airport could be closed at any point, the race is on to fly thousands of tourists home. The first wave goes on package holidays. Independent travellers may have a longer wait.
The airlines have said they'll try and bring them home early, but it's a question of what availability they have currently on the flights coming back already. So we will be done on a first-come, first-served basis. So if you're on a package, you're in a much better position.
Travel warnings have been issued after the Gambia's long-standing president, Yahya Jammeh, challenged the election victory of his rival, Adama Barrow, and declared a 90-day state of emergency.
Military intervention is likely, especially since the African Union has made it very clear that they are not going to recognize Yahya Jammeh as Gambian president from tomorrow onwards. So a military intervention is likely. A civil war might break out.
Tour operators like the Gambia Experience and bigger firms like Thomas Cook are bringing people home and giving those due to travel soon other options.
If you're in the Gambia and you are offered a flight out and you choose not to accept it, then your travel insurance is going to be invalidated. And of course the same applies to anybody who decides to go there on holiday independently until the Foreign Office changes its advice.
Longer-term trips to the Gambia were still being advertised today, but anyone trying to book for the next couple of weeks will find the country's uncertain political situation has put a stop to their plans.
Well, let's talk to Peter now. He's at Manchester Airport. Peter, those first flights due back this evening?
Yes, a flight was due in here at 6:30. It's now been delayed until around 10:30. 2 other flights coming into Manchester and 2 expected at Gatwick. Thomas Cook are bringing home almost 1,000 tourists through today and tomorrow, and then there are around 2,500 flight-only customers to follow after that. The crunch point, as you heard there in the report, could be tomorrow because that's when the President-elect Adama Barrow was due to be sworn in. He and his supporters have vowed that that will still go ahead, tweeting, "Our future starts tomorrow."
Peter, thank you. In a few weeks, the Prime Minister has to take her big Brexit plan to other EU leaders and officially begin negotiations. But it's already being held up to plenty of scrutiny. In the House of Commons, both the Labour and SNP leaders tackled the decision to quit the single market, while across Europe, reaction to her announcement has been somewhat mixed. Here's our chief correspondent, Tessa Chapman.
Yesterday she set out her Brexit stance. Today it was time to defend it. So Theresa May headed to Prime Minister's questions and the gloves were off. First, an accusation that she'd snubbed Parliament by not making the big speech here.
Restoring parliamentary democracy while sidelining Parliament. Mr. Speaker, it's not so much the Iron Lady as the Irony Lady.
Then an attack on her pledge to leave the single market. 3 times Mr. Corbyn asked whether we would pay for access to it. She wouldn't answer.
I consider the issue, I set out my plan, and I stick to it. It's called leadership. He should try it sometime.
The SNP leader wasn't any easier on her. A hard Brexit, he says, will cost jobs and money.
Does the Prime Minister believe that this is a price worth paying for her little Britain Brexit?
That's a nod to this German newspaper with its mocking headline. Other European media were lukewarm in their response to the big speech. Then the French president warned Britain shouldn't have a better deal outside the single market. And on a trip to India, this was our chief diplomat's response.
I think that if Monsieur Hollande wants to administer punishment beatings to anybody who chooses to escape, rather in the manner of some sort of World War II movie, then I don't think that is the way forward.
In true Boris style, an apparent Nazi comparison. Good job they didn't seem to be listening at the EU.
We are not in an hostile mood. We want a fair deal with Britain and a fair deal for Britain, but a fair deal means a fair deal for the European Union too.
Because no one wants to lose out. This is a divorce after all. And it's still 2 months before we get round the negotiating table.
And Tessa's in Westminster now. Tessa, we heard Boris Johnson, the Foreign Secretary, talking about punchings and beatings. Has Number 10 had anything to say about that?
Yes, we've just heard from a spokesperson, actually, who said that Boris was not in any way suggesting that anyone was a Nazi. They said it was a theatrical comparison that has been hyped up. But a Labour spokesperson said he has a history of making inappropriate comments. This is not something that's going to improve the climate for negotiations. And you can't imagine that Theresa May will be very pleased to see this making headlines. Her big strategy has been laid out, but the tactics and diplomacy are vital. In another development, we have heard that the Supreme Court ruling over whether she needs to get MPs' approval before invoking Article 50 will be heard on Tuesday at 9:30 in the morning.
OK, Tessa, thanks for that. Now, it was billed as the battle between the buggy and the wheelchair. Which should have priority on public transport? At the Supreme Court today, judges sided with disability campaigners in a case brought by a wheelchair user who was refused entry onto a bus when a mother with a pushchair refused to move. A victory, you'd think, but moments later, as we were filming, another of the campaigners had problems getting onto a bus, leaving her in tears on a day that had begun with celebrations. Olivia Kinsley reports.
The beaming face of a man who took his fight to the country's highest court and won.
This is a major day for rights of disabled people. Catching the bus is a fundamental thing that most people expect to be able to do.
Doug Pawley brought his case in 2012 after he couldn't board a bus in Yorkshire when a mother with a pram refused to move. Today, the Supreme Court ruled that bus drivers must do more to help disabled passengers by pressuring non-wheelchair users to vacate the designated wheelchair space when reasonable.
If somebody is selfishly and unreasonably being in the space and there's no extra special reason that they're in there, because there's always exceptions, the bus driver has to insist that they move, tell them it's company policy they move, and then if they don't, then refuse to move the bus.
Do you think that's strong enough? Because that leaves the onus on bus drivers to decide when something is unreasonable.
Bus drivers already have to decide what's unreasonable all the time. And what the justices said was that they don't feel that this should be a very difficult thing for drivers to have to make a judgment on.
We spoke to one wheelchair user about some of the problems she's faced when using public transport.
And it happened to me a lot of times. And I've been accused, I've been abused, I've been called by a little creature, wheelchair user. And to me, it's like, I only want to travel in a bus, I don't need all that.
A few minutes later, Kurdistan tried to board a bus with an empty double buggy on board. The bus driver moved it, but then this happened.
You just told me.
What I'm saying to you is unreasonable.
No,
Suppose the lady came downstairs and put her 2 kids in the buggy. What would you do?
Yeah, but
You still couldn't get on the bus though,
Listen to me, do you know what bus stop she's going?
No, you don't know what bus
So is it fair empty buggy stay there on the wheelchair driver and you
But she's a priority as well. She's got 2 kids.
Driver said it's 2 bag inside. And then I said to him, well, it's an empty buggy, no child. So he said, wait, he went upstairs. He said, oh, the buggy owner is upstairs. And I can't. The buggy
Come on the bus, come on the bus, we're waiting on you. Come on the bus, just come on the bus. You're holding up the bus because it's for everybody. Can you come on the bus?
Get to work, hurry up.
That's what I'm saying, get on the bus then.
Campaigners may have won in court today, but this shows it could be very difficult to enforce. Olivia Kinsley, 5 News.
The family of a 16-year-old girl whose body was found on a path in South Yorkshire say they're devastated. Leonie Weeks was stabbed to death in Dinnington on Monday. Her family say she was very much loved and will be missed by all. An 18-year-old man is being questioned on suspicion of murder. And the UK's biggest phone network, EE, has been fined £2.7 million for overcharging customers. The regulator found that thousands of people paid up to 6 times more than they should have done while making calls in Europe. Inquests into the deaths of 30 British people who were killed in a terrorist attack in Tunisia have heard that tour firms were reluctant to increase security there because they didn't want to scare the tourists. Well, Layla Hayes is following those inquests at the Royal Courts of Justice for us. Layla, talk us through what we heard today.
Well, this morning we heard from Venancio Lopez. Now, he worked for a subsidiary of the tour operator TUI on the ground in Tunisia. And he said that tour operators had wanted to increase security because there had already been a terror attack on a museum in the capital, Tunis. But he said they didn't want to scare holidaymakers by seeing an army of police on the street. Well, 30 British tourists died in the beach attack in Sousse. And once again today, their families came here to the Royal Courts of Justice to hear evidence. This afternoon, they became visibly upset listening to a statement read out from resort manager from TUI called Camilla Beckerfold. Now, she described how on the day of the attack, she saw bodies, and she said how many of those killed or injured were in swimwear, so it was difficult to identify them. And she also said that she had to go through their possessions and pack up their rooms. At that point, one family member left the court. This is difficult evidence to listen to, but these families are determined to get answers. This inquest is expected to last for 7 weeks.
Thank you, Layla. Coming up on 5 News. Practising for the president, but will the real inauguration ceremony go smoothly? And on the slow train from China, the train that's made a 7,500-mile journey to London. We'll see you after the break. Hello and welcome back. You're watching 5 News. Young people with eating disorders are being sent hundreds of miles away from home for treatment. That's according to a new report. It found that 7 health authorities were sending patients from counties like Kent and Buckinghamshire to hospitals in Glasgow and Edinburgh. Our health correspondent Catherine Jones reports.
For the last 6 months, Julia and Stephen have been supporting their daughter Fiona as she battles severe anorexia.
She was good then, isn't she?
But to visit her, they must travel from their home in Buckinghamshire to the specialist unit where Fiona is being treated, almost 400 miles away in Scotland.
We were really angry, really worried at the length of time it took to get the bed. That was the bit where we were at our most concerned. And that's when we were desperate, actually.
You thought she might die?
Yeah. So when she's offered a bed and it's in Glasgow, you grab it.
She is getting excellent care there. But I do wish it was closer, and I do wish I could go and give her a hug.
This is the private clinic in Glasgow which had the only bed the NHS in England could offer Fiona. Today, a report reveals 13 of the clinic's 17 patients were from England last month. The high number of patients being transferred long distances means they get very few or no visitors, the report finds, warning this infringes on the right to family life.
There's an issue of the human rights of these people who have to come to Glasgow for care. They have a right to family life, which we think isn't being fully respected. But also, this is clinically bad for them.
NHS England says investment in mental health is now rising faster than for other services. But Fiona's parents believe their experience is far from unique.
The provision, as soon as you've turned 18, just disappears. And it's shocking.
Fiona's parents want her well and will put up with anything to make that happen.
Yes, and we're looking forward to having some nice new memories to put in, some new photographs.
But a system that sees the most vulnerable separated from their loved ones clearly needs urgent change. Catherine Jones, 5 News.
Donald Trump has brushed off problems surrounding his inauguration as president this Friday. High-profile celebrities have refused to appear, while a number of opposition politicians say they're boycotting the event. Dominic Reynolds reports.
At the Capitol, it's dress rehearsal time. There's a stand-in taking the oath in the red tie. The moment Donald Trump takes it for real on Friday, a presidency will begin which itself once seemed make-believe.
Things will be done differently than they have been over the past 8 years.
Mr. Trump's been doing his transition differently too. Traditionally a time for unifying. President number 45 has been antagonising this man. Veteran Congressman John Lewis stood alongside Martin Luther King in the civil rights movement. He's boycotting Trump's inauguration, which he said he's never done before. But in a new interview, Trump says Lewis did boycott George W. Bush, and he's been caught lying.
He got caught, and it's pretty bad, and it's making him look bad, frankly. We're off to a bad start, there's no question about it. What he did was a very, very bad thing. Not for me. For me, it doesn't matter. He did a bad thing for the country.
They're calling the inauguration concert Make America Great Again, but it seems the biggest names can't make it. While 8 years ago, Barack Obama had Beyoncé, Bruce Springsteen and Stevie Wonder singing their support. Donald Trump has attracted talent show runner-up Jackie Evancho, some members of the dance troupe The Rockettes, and a rock band called 3 Doors Down. But as America looks towards Trump's presidential future, there's an awkward reminder of his game show past.
Today I filed a lawsuit against Donald Trump for defamation.
Former Apprentice contestant Summer Zervos was called a liar by then-candidate Trump on the campaign trail after she alleged sexual misconduct.
Since Mr. Trump has not issued a retraction, as I requested, he has therefore left me with no alternative other than to sue him in order to vindicate my reputation.
As the scaffold was going up today, 2 polls found Trump's approval numbers were lower than any other president-elect in history. While Friday's ceremony will have the speeches and the spectacle like the dozens which have gone before it, the reality is this is an inauguration like no other. Dominic Reynolds, 5 News.
Finally, we've heard how Britain is seeking a new era in global trade. Could this train be part of the answer? It's laden with tons of goods and travelled all the way from China to the UK. It set off on January the 1st, New Year's Day, from here, the eastern city of Yiwu. It then headed through the deserts and mountain ranges of western China, through the vast expanses of Kazakhstan and Russia, and then on to Belarus, Poland, Germany, Belgium, and France. Finally, today it arrived in Barking in East London, a journey of nearly 7,500 miles. Minnie Stevenson was there to greet it.
Now it's the stuff of train-spotting dreams and a moment for the history books as the first freight train from China to Britain arrived, after making an epic journey from East Asia to East London. And we were here to wave it in after a rather lengthy journey over 2.5 weeks. To be fair, it has come rather a long way. And if you just come with me over here, you can see it was carrying over 34 containers, each of them with goods made in China. On here, we've got clothes, we've got bags, and most importantly, a great British staple. I have been told there are millions of pairs of socks on board, so nobody panic. And it's faster than a ship, cheaper than a plane, but this train is a sign business experts say that trade between the UK and China is alive and well.
It's significant for a couple of reasons. Firstly, because it shows China is increasingly becoming a part of the whole global business environment. But secondly, and more importantly, for the China-Britain Business Council, we're excited about this because we hope that it's another route to market for UK products in China.
The train owned by China's state railway takes the ancient Silk Road route, used as far back as 200 BC by merchants who would trade goods from the Far East. And let's be honest, it's not every day traditional Chinese lion dancing takes over a car park in East London. Was it a bit surreal seeing that train come in and dancing for it?
Yeah, absolutely, considering obviously how far it's come. I've still got a lot of family out in Southeast Asia, so it's great just to have another connection, another line between us.
OK, we're going to talk to your man at the back here of the line. Hello.
Hello.
What's it like performing as a lion dancer in the middle of this glamorous car park in East London?
It's great, considering how far the train's travelled like thousands of miles, so definitely a great step for the between UK and East Asia.
I'll let you dance.
All right,
Off
thanks.
you go. Two countries, thousands of miles apart, but now just a slow train away. Minnie Stevenson, 5 News.
And that's it for now. Matt's going to be here at 6:30 with the second of his special programmes on Donald Trump's presidency. Claire Nazir has the weather next. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye for now.